My son's wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives, but in mere seconds, the gentle music faded as I felt the cold impact of his fist against my shoulder. Moments later, he was on his knees, begging me to pay off his $1.2 million gambling debt, money that would destroy everything my late husband had built. I thought the pain might kill me. Instead, I decided to start a war. My name is Eleanor Carter, and I've survived hostile takeovers, market crashes, and 35 years in corporate finance. But nothing prepared me for the moment my own son's fist connected with my shoulder in the dimly lit corridor behind his wedding reception. The mansion on Forsyth Park had never looked more elegant. Golden light spilled from crystal chandeliers, casting warm shadows across the Spanish moss-draped oaks visible through floor-to-ceiling windows. 200 guests mingled in the ballroom, their laughter mixing with the string quartet's rendition of Pachelbel's Canyon. Everything was perfect, the gardenias floating in crystal bowls, the 7-tier cake adorned with sugar magnolias, the bride's cathedral-length veil that had belonged to my mother. I'd stepped out to catch my breath, overwhelmed by the sight of Evan dancing with his new wife. My baby boy, now 32, had grown into such a handsome man. He had Richard's strong jaw, my dark eyes, and what I'd always believed was a good heart beneath his occasional recklessness. "Mom," his voice came from behind me, urgent and strained. "I need to talk to you, now." I turned to find him disheveled, his bow tie askew, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. The smell of bourbon clung to him like cologne. "Evan, honey, what's wrong? You should be with Clara." "Mom, I need you to sign something." He thrust a folder at me with shaking hands. "The beach houses. I need you to transfer them to me tonight." The beach houses, 2 pristine properties on Tybee Island that Richard had bought as investments 20 years ago, now worth $3 million combined. I opened the folder to find transfer documents, already filled out, requiring only my signature. "Evan Carter, what on earth?" "Please, Mom, don't ask questions, just sign." 35 years of reading contracts, detecting fraud, and navigating corporate deception had honed my instincts to a razor's edge. The desperation in his voice, the tremor in his hands, the way his eyes darted toward the exit. Every alarm bell in my head was screaming. "No." "Mom, you don't understand. I owe money, a lot of money." "How much?" He couldn't meet my eyes. 1.2 million. The number hit me like ice water. 1.2. "Evan, how could you possibly—" "Wait, it doesn't matter how—" His voice cracked. "They'll kill me. Mom, these aren't the kind of people who accept payment plans." "We'll go to the police." "No!" The word exploded from him. Then it happened. His hand shot out, meant for the papers. But when I pulled them back, his fist connected with my shoulder instead. The force sent me stumbling backward into the wall. We both froze, in the ballroom. The band had switched to "The Way You Look Tonight" through the door's window. I could see Clara laughing with her bridesmaids, oblivious to the violence occurring 20 feet away. "Mom, I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" But I was already moving, my Manolo Blahniks clicking against the marble as I headed for the service exit. Behind me, I heard the awful sound of my son dropping to his knees. "Mom, please, I'm begging you." I didn't stop, couldn't stop. The burning in my shoulder was nothing compared to the ice forming around my heart. Evan continued pleading, his voice echoing off the walls, but I kept walking. Through the kitchen, past startled catering staff, out into the humid savannah night. My hand found my phone automatically, muscle memory from decades of crisis management. But this wasn't a hostile takeover or a client's bankruptcy. This was my son, on his wedding day, assaulting me for money to pay gambling debts that could cost him his life. I stood in the garden, surrounded by the scent of night-blooming jasmine, and made a decision. Evan had been reckless before. The DUI in college, the failed business ventures, the string of broken relationships. I'd always cushioned his falls, written the checks, made the problems disappear. Not this time. My shoulder throbbed as I walked to my car. Through the ballroom windows, I could see the reception continuing in full swing. The mother of the groom's absence would be noticed soon, but I didn't care. I had calls to make, plans to set in motion. As I drove away from the mansion on Forsyth Park, leaving behind the fairy lights and champagne toasts, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Someone had turned my son into a desperate man willing to strike his own mother. And I was going to find out who. The bridal suite at the mansion was supposed to be off limits, but a $100 bill to a harried staff member bought me 10 minutes alone. I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, finally allowing myself to feel the full weight of what had just happened. My hands shook as I unbuttoned my jacket. In the mirror, the bruise was already forming, an ugly purple bloom spreading across my shoulder like spilled wine. I stared at it for exactly 30 seconds, allowing myself that brief window of maternal anguish. 30 seconds to grieve the son I thought I knew. 30 seconds to feel the physical pain that was nothing compared to the emotional devastation. Then I was done. The Eleanor Carter who had clawed her way from junior analyst to CFO of one of Savannah's largest development firms took over. Pain was just data. Emotion was a luxury I couldn't afford. Not when someone had orchestrated this perfectly targeting my son's weakness, timing it for maximum pressure, attempting to strip away assets that represented my husband's legacy. I pulled out my phone and speed-dialed Howard Blake. He answered on the second ring, despite it being 9:45 p.m. on a Saturday. "Eleanor, aren't you at Evan's wedding?" "Howard, I need you to freeze every account I have access to. Everything, joint accounts, trust funds, investment portfolios. Do it now." There was a pause. Howard had been my attorney for 20 years. He knew better than to question that tone. "I'll need to file emergency documentation. What's the threat?" "Potential fraud, coercion. I'll explain tomorrow, but I need those assets protected tonight." "Consider it done. I'll have my paralegal start the paperwork immediately. Eleanor." "Are you safe?" I touched the bruise gently. "Safe enough. One more thing. I need you to pull everything you have on the wedding planner. Miles Hargrove." "The wedding planner? Eleanor, what's going on?" "That's what I intend to find out." After ending the call, I sat on the plush ottoman and forced myself to think. 1.2 million in gambling debts don't materialize overnight. This had been building for months, maybe years. How had I missed it? I'd been so focused on my own grief after Richard's death 2 years ago, so eager to see Evan happy and settled with Clara, that I'd ignored the warning signs. My phone buzzed. A text from Evan. "Mom, I'm sorry, please come back. We need to talk." I deleted it without responding. Instead, I scrolled through my contacts to find Ray Doyle, the private investigator who'd helped me uncover embezzlement at my firm 5 years ago. He answered with his usual gruff efficiency. "Mrs. Carter, it's been a while. Ray, I need a comprehensive background check on Miles Hargrove, the wedding planner at the Hargrove Events Group, financial records, personal history, any connections to gambling operations in the Southeast, and I need it fast." "How fast?" 48 hours. Price is no object. That kind of timeline. This is serious. My son owes $1.2 million to someone. I have reason to believe Hargrove is involved. Ray whistled low. "That's a hefty debt. Your boy mixed up with the Torino family? The Calabrese crew?" "That's what I need you to find out." "I'll start tonight. Eleanor." If this is organized crime we're talking about, you might want to consider federal protection. Let's establish the facts first. And Ray? Hargrove attended a lot of social functions with my late husband. Go back at least 5 years in your search? Understood. I ended the call and stood, smoothing my dress. Through the window, I could see the reception continuing below. The band was playing something upbeat now. Earth, wind, and fire, from the sound of it. Normal people celebrating a normal wedding, unaware that the mother of the groom was preparing for war from the bridal suite. My reflection in the full-length mirror showed a woman I barely recognized, not the grieving widow who'd been going through the motions for 2 years. Not the doting mother who'd spent $30,000 on flowers alone for this wedding. This was someone harder, colder. Someone Richard would have recognized from our early days, when we were building our empire from nothing. I touched the bruise one more time, then buttoned my jacket to hide it. Evidence. Everything was evidence now. My phone rang. The caller ID showed Clara's number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Eleanor?" Her voice was barely a whisper. Can you meet me, please? I'm in the ladies' lounge by the coat check. I need to tell you something about Miles." The ice in my chest cracked slightly. Clara's voice held the same desperation as Evan's, but with something else. Fear. Raw, trembling fear. "I'll be right there." As I left the bridal suite, I caught sight of myself in the hallway mirror. 68 years old, widowed, betrayed by my only child, and possibly facing off against organized crime. Most women my age were planning retirement cruises. But I was Eleanor Carter, and someone had made the fatal mistake of coming for my family's money. They had no idea what they'd just started. The ladies' lounge was a sanctuary of cream silk and gold fixtures, but Clara looked like a broken doll against the elegant backdrop. Her wedding dress, a $40,000 Vera Wang creation, pooled around her as she sat huddled on the velvet settee. Mascara tracking dark rivers down her cheeks. "Clara, sweetheart, what's wrong?" She looked up at me with haunted eyes. "I'm sorry, Eleanor. I'm so sorry. I never wanted any of this." I sat beside her, careful to keep my bruised shoulder turned away. "What are you talking about?" "The wedding, Evan, everything." "It's all a lie." Her hands twisted in her lap, crushing the delicate lace. "Miles made me do it. He said if I didn't marry Evan and help him get access to your money, my brother would die." The room seemed to tilt. I forced my voice to remain steady. "Start from the beginning. Tell me everything." Clara pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. "My brother Tommy has congenital heart disease. He needed a transplant, but we couldn't afford it. No insurance would cover him because of pre-existing conditions. Then Miles appeared like some kind of savior." She showed me emails dating back 8 months. The first one seemed legitimate, a charity called Hearts of Hope, offering to cover Tommy's medical expenses through their transplant fund. The signature at the bottom, Miles Hargrove, Director of Development. "He paid for everything," Clara continued. $300,000 for the surgery, plus aftercare. Tommy's alive because of that money. I thought Miles was an angel." "When did you realize he wasn't?" 2 months after the surgery. He came to me with photos of Tommy leaving physical therapy, going to school, playing basketball. The message was clear. He knew where my brother was at all times. Then he told me what I had to do. She scrolled to newer emails. The tone had shifted from benevolent to threatening. "You owe me more than money. Clara, you owe me access. The Carter fortune will clear both our debts." "He forced you to date my son?" "He introduced us at a charity gala he planned, made sure Evan noticed me. I was supposed to just get close to him, find out about your finances, but..." Her voice broke. "I fell in love with him. Really fell in love. Evan's sweet and funny and kind when he's not desperate. I tried to back out, told Miles I couldn't do it anymore." She showed me the final email, dated a week before the wedding. "Tommy's anti-rejection medications are very expensive. It would be tragic if he couldn't access them anymore. The wedding will proceed as planned." I felt a cold fury building in my chest. The gambling debts? Is that real? Miles set it all up. He introduced Evan to the games, extended him credit, encouraged him to bet bigger. Your son never stood a chance. Miles knew exactly which buttons to push. Evan wanted so badly to prove he could be successful like his father, could make his own fortune without your help. And the $1.2 million? It's real debt, but it's owed to shell companies Miles controls. The threat is real, too. He's hired actual enforcers to make it seem legitimate. Evan doesn't know any of this. He thinks he's in trouble with the mob. I stood, pacing to the window, outside. Savannah's historic district glittered in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Miles Hargrove was probably congratulating himself on his elaborate scheme. Clara, I need you to forward all those emails to my attorney. Every single one. He'll kill Tommy. No. I turned back to her, and something in my face made her stop mid-sentence. He won't, because we're going to destroy him first, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that? She nodded slowly. What about Evan? When he finds out I've been lying... My son struck me tonight. I saw her flinch. He's so desperate he was willing to physically assault his own mother for money. The Evan you fell in love with is still in there, but right now, he's drowning. We're going to save him by taking down the man who pushed him into the water. How? First, you're going to go back to that reception and play the perfect bride. Don't let Miles suspect anything has changed. Can you do that? I've been acting for 8 months. I can manage a few more hours. Good. Tomorrow, you and Evan leave for your honeymoon in Bermuda as planned. I'll handle things here. Clara stood, wiping her eyes carefully, even devastated. She was lovely, the kind of daughter-in-law I dreamed of having. Now I understood why Miles had chosen her. Not just beautiful, but vulnerable. A woman with a weak spot he could exploit. Eleanor, why did Miles target your family? This seems like so much work just for money. There are easier marks. I thought about Ray Doyle's investigation, about the social functions where Miles had smiled and charmed while standing next to Richard. That's what I intend to find out. As Clara prepared to return to her reception, I caught her hand. You're not alone anymore. Tommy's going to be fine. You have my word. How can you be sure? Because I'm Eleanor Carter, and Mr. Hargrove is about to learn what happens when you threaten my family. She squeezed my hand, then glided from the lounge, transforming back into the glowing bride. I waited 5 minutes before following, my mind already cataloging next steps. Howard would have the assets protected by now. Ray would be digging into Hargrove's past, and somewhere in Richard's old files. I suspected I'd find the answer to Clara's question. Why us? Why now? And what did Miles Hargrove really want? The bruise on my shoulder throbbed as I rejoined the reception, but I smiled and mingled as if nothing had happened. Let Miles think he'd won this round. The real game was just beginning. Richard's home office remained exactly as he'd left it 2 years ago. I'd been unable to change anything, finding comfort in the lingering scent of his cologne and the precise arrangement of his Mont Blanc pens. Now, at 3:15 a.m., I sat behind his mahogany desk with a purpose that would have made him proud. Ray Doyle had called an hour earlier with preliminary findings. Miles Hargrove didn't exist before 1995, he'd said. Before that, he was Mitchell Harrington, a junior partner at your husband's first development firm. The name sent me diving into Richard's meticulously organized files. My husband had been many things: charming, ambitious, ruthless when necessary, but above all, he'd been thorough. Every business deal, every partnership, every contract for 35 years was documented and stored. I found what I was looking for in a box labeled Coastal Partners 1,993 to 1,994 inches. The papers told a brutal story. Mitchell Harrington and Richard Carter had partnered on a waterfront development project in Charleston. The initial investment was 50-50, but the contracts, God, Richard had been brilliant, contained clauses that gradually shifted ownership based on performance metrics that favored Richard's strengths. By the end, Mitchell owned nothing while Richard walked away with $8 million in profits. But it was the handwritten note clipped to the final settlement that stopped my blood cold. Mitchell, you were weak, and weakness has a price. Take the 100,000 severance and disappear. Try to fight this, and I'll destroy whatever's left of your reputation. R.C. Beneath it, in different ink, Richard had added, for the family, Eleanor and Evan deserve better than a business partner who would have dragged us all down. I set the papers aside with trembling hands. Richard had always told me Mitchell had been bought out fairly, that he'd chosen to leave the business. Another lie to protect me or protect his image of himself. The next folder contained newspaper clippings: Mitchell Harrington's spectacular fall from grace bankruptcy, divorce, a suicide attempt, then nothing until Miles Hargrove appeared in Savannah's social scene in 1995, reinvented as an event planner extraordinaire. My laptop chimed with a new email from Ray. Found the connection. Hargrove's been playing a long game. Every major client he's taken on over the past 5 years has some connection to your late husband's business dealings, the Weatherbys. Richard foreclosed on their mansion in '98. The Sinclairs, he undercut their bid for the Harbor Point project. The list goes on. But here's the interesting part. Hearts of Hope, the charity that paid for Clara's brother's surgery, it's funded entirely by money Hargrove's been skimming from these clients through inflated event costs. He's been building a war chest, Eleanor. And it all leads to you. I leaned back in Richard's chair, understanding flooding through me like ice water. This wasn't about the $1.2 million. That was just the mechanism. This was about complete destruction, taking our assets, destroying Evan's life, leaving us with nothing, just like Richard had left Mitchell with nothing. Another email arrived, this one with financial records. Miles had been brilliant in his own way. The gambling operation was real but controlled. The debt was structured to be just beyond Evan's ability to pay without liquidating family assets. The timeline was compressed to prevent any careful consideration or legal consultation. But he'd made one mistake. He'd underestimated me. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Margaret, our housekeeper of 20 years, peered in with a cup of tea. "Saw the light on," she said softly. "Thought you might need this." "Bless you. Margaret, did you know Mitchell Harrington?" Her face tightened. I remember him. Weak chin, weaker spine, always hanging around Mr. Richard like a puppy, trying to copy everything he did. When that partnership ended, she shook her head. "Mister, Richard did what he had to do. That man would have bled you dry with his incompetence." After she left, I continued through the files. More pieces fell into place. Mitchell's son had died in 2020 drug overdose after years of addiction that started when his father lost everything. His ex-wife had sued Richard in 1996, claiming intentional infliction of emotional distress. The case had been settled quietly. By 5 a.m., I had the full picture. Miles Hargrove, nee Mitchell Harrington, had spent 27 years building toward this moment. Every society connection, every carefully cultivated relationship, every dollar skimmed and saved, all for the purpose of destroying Richard Carter's widow and son the same way Richard had destroyed him. I picked up my phone and texted Clara, "Change of plans. Don't get on the plane today. Trust me." Then I called Howard. "I need you to set up a meeting. Tell Miles Hargrove I'm ready to discuss terms for Evan's debt. Make it seem like I'm broken, desperate. Tomorrow night, your office." "Eleanor, what are you planning?" "Justice, Howard, or revenge. At my age, I'm not sure there's a difference anymore." I gathered the most damning documents, the contracts, the suicide attempt report, the charity fraud evidence Ray had uncovered. Then I noticed one final item in the box, a photo from the company Christmas party, 1993. Richard stood proud and tall, his arm around my shoulder. In the background, slightly out of focus, Mitchell Harrington watched us with an expression I only now recognized. Pure, calculating hatred. I closed the files and walked to the window. Dawn was breaking over Savannah, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, somewhere out there. Miles Hargrove was probably savoring his perceived victory, thinking he'd finally balanced the scales after nearly 3 decades. He was wrong. Richard might have destroyed Mitchell Harrington, but Eleanor Carter was about to destroy Miles Hargrove, and unlike my husband, I wouldn't leave even $100,000 in severance. Some sins demanded complete annihilation. The circa 1875 gastropub occupied a restored Victorian mansion on Whitaker Street, its exposed brick walls and Edison bulbs creating an atmosphere of carefully curated Southern charm. I chose a table by the window where I could watch the door, ordered a glass of Sancerre I wouldn't drink, and waited. Miles Hargrove arrived precisely at 2 p.m., immaculate in a cream linen suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. Up close, I could see traces of Mitchell Harrington in the weak chin Margaret had mentioned. Now disguised by a carefully groomed beard, the years had been kind to him, or perhaps revenge was its own fountain of youth. Eleanor. He settled across from me with practiced grace. I was surprised to hear from you. I thought you might need more time to process recent events. My son's welfare takes precedence over my processing time. He smiled, and I saw the predator beneath the polish. Of course. A mother's love. It's really quite touching. The waiter approached, but Miles waved him away. I won't be staying long. I assume Howard explained my position? $1.2 million by Friday, or Evan faces consequences. I let my voice tremble slightly. I need more time. Time? He leaned back, studying me like a specimen. Eleanor, we both know you have the assets. The beach houses alone would cover it. The properties are tied up in trust structures. Richard was very careful about estate planning. Ah, yes, Richard. His fingers drummed against the table. He was always so careful, wasn't he? So thorough, so protective of his family's interests. I forced myself to meet his eyes, playing the role of the desperate mother. What do you want, Miles? Is this really about money? For a moment, his mask slipped. You really don't know, do you? All these years. Sitting in that mansion, spending money your husband stole from people like me, and you have no idea. I don't understand. Mitchell Harrington. He spoke the name like a curse. Does that ring any bells? Eleanor? Or were you too busy picking out curtain swatches while your husband destroyed lives? I let recognition dawn slowly across my face. Mitchell. From Coastal Partners? But that was... Richard said he bought him out. Bought me out? His laugh was bitter. Your husband manipulated contracts, destroyed my reputation, and left me with nothing. I lost my business, my wife, my son. Do you know what happened to my boy, Eleanor? Miles, I had no idea. He died. The words came out sharp as glass. Overdosed in a flophouse in Atlanta. All because his father couldn't afford rehab, couldn't provide stability, couldn't be the man he needed. And why? Because Richard Carter decided I was expendable. I reached for my wine glass with a shaking hand, no longer needing to feign distress. The pain in his voice was real. Decades of festering grief and rage. So yes, he continued, composing himself, this is about money, but it's also about justice. Your son will lose everything, just like I did. You'll watch him spiral, just like I watched my son. And when you're left with nothing but regret, maybe you'll understand a fraction of what your family did to mine. Evan isn't Richard, I said quietly. He's innocent in all this. So was my son. Innocence didn't save him. We sat in silence for a moment. Around us, Savannah's lunch crowd chattered obliviously, discussing real estate and restaurants while we negotiated the price of revenge. I've seen what desperation does to Evan, I said finally. The way he looked at me, what he was willing to do. You've already started destroying him. Good. But something flickered in his eyes. Doubt? Satisfaction not quite as complete as he'd expected? What if I could offer you something more than money? I asked. What if I could give you what you really want? He leaned forward. I'm listening. A confession, a public acknowledgement of what Richard did to you. His reputation is all I have left of him, but I'll destroy it if it saves my son. For the first time since he'd walked in, Miles looked genuinely surprised. You do that? I'm a mother first, a widow second. I'll hold a press conference. Release the documents. Admit that the Carter fortune was built on the backs of people like you. Your name will be cleared, your story told. Isn't that worth more than money? He studied me for a long moment. You're more formidable than I expected. Eleanor, Richard always said you were just a pretty accessory, but I see he underestimated you too. Most men do. The debt stands, he said finally, but I'll give you until next week to arrange the transfer. And I want that confession in writing, notarized, ready to release. You'll get it, Tomorrow night, Howard's office. We'll finalize everything." He stood, straightening his jacket. "You know, Eleanor, under different circumstances, I think I might have liked you. You have a pragmatism your husband lacked. Under different circumstances, Miles, you wouldn't have needed to destroy my family to find peace." He paused at that, then nodded slowly. "Perhaps not. But we don't get to choose our circumstances, do we? We only get to choose our responses. I'll see you tomorrow night." I watched him leave, noting the slight stoop to his shoulders. The weight of 27 years of planning for this moment, he thought he'd won. That I was a grieving widow willing to sacrifice her husband's memory to save her wastrel son. But I'd seen something in our conversation he hadn't meant to reveal. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It had become his entire identity. Without it, Miles Hargrove had nothing left to live for. That would be his downfall. I paid for my untouched wine and walked out into the afternoon heat. One more day to prepare, to gather all the pieces. Tomorrow night in Howard's office, I'd show Miles Hargrove what happened when you threatened Eleanor Carter's family. Richard had destroyed Mitchell Harrington with contracts and cruelty. I would destroy Miles Hargrove with something far more devastating. The truth, the war room was my dining table, cleared of its usual Waterford crystal and transformed into a command center. Howard Blake sat to my right, legal documents spread before him like battle plans. Ray Doyle occupied the left, laptop open to surveillance feeds from his network of contacts. Clara perched nervously on the edge of her chair, still in her honeymoon clothes after I'd intercepted them at the airport. "Walk me through it one more time," I said, studying the forged transfer documents Howard had prepared. "These look authentic enough to pass initial scrutiny," Howard explained. "Bank routing numbers, property deed references, all legitimate, but the actual transfer codes are invalid. If Miles tries to process these, they'll be flagged immediately as fraudulent." "And that's when we spring the trap," Ray added. "I've got contacts at Savannah PD ready to move. The moment he attempts to use these documents, it's attempted grand theft and fraud." "What about the evidence of his crimes?" I asked. Clara pushed forward a thick folder. Email trails showing the charity scam, recordings of him threatening me about Tommy, financial records of the shell companies he used to launder Evan's gambling debts. It's all here. The FBI's white-collar crime unit is particularly interested in the charity fraud, Howard noted. Using a fake hearts and transplants fund to manipulate vulnerable families? That's 20 years minimum. I nodded, but my mind was on the final piece, the press. Janine Morrison from the Savannah Morning News will be there, Ray confirmed. She's been investigating financial crimes in the charity sector. This story will make her career. And Detective Williams? Ready and waiting. We've briefed him on the assault at the wedding, though Evan doesn't know we have security footage of it yet. I touched my shoulder unconsciously. The bruise had faded to yellow-green, but its memory remained sharp. "Eleanor," Clara said softly, "what about Evan? When he finds out the truth..." "He'll be devastated," I finished, "but alive and free. Sometimes that's all a mother can give her child, a second chance." We spent the next 2 hours rehearsing every detail. I would play the broken widow, desperate to save her son. Clara would remain hidden in Howard's private conference room, ready to appear at the crucial moment. Ray's associates would be positioned throughout the building. "Remember," Howard cautioned, "he's desperate too. 27 years of planning are coming to fruition. Desperate people do dangerous things." "I'm counting on it," I said. "Desperate people make mistakes." As afternoon faded to evening, I prepared carefully. The black St. John suit Richard had loved. "You look like a CEO in that, darling," paired with my grandmother's pearls. Vulnerable but dignified. A woman preparing to sign away her heritage. Clara helped me with my makeup, her hands steady despite everything. "You're not what I expected in a mother-in-law," she said quietly. "What did you expect?" "Someone softer. I suppose less..." She searched for words. "Less fierce." Richard used to say I was like Scarlett O'Hara, sweet on the outside, steel underneath. He meant it as a compliment, though I was never sure. Evan doesn't know how lucky he is. I met her eyes in the mirror. He will. After tomorrow, he'll understand everything we've done was for love, even if he hates us for it initially. My phone buzzed. A text from Miles, confirming 8 p.m., come alone. Showtime, Ray muttered, already coordinating with his surveillance team. I stood, smoothing my skirt, checking my appearance one final time. The woman in the mirror looked older than her 68 years, worn down by grief and betrayal. Perfect. You know what the ironic part is? I said to the room. Richard would have admired Miles's plan, the patience, the attention to detail, the poetic justice of it all. He always said the best revenge was served cold. Except Miles forgot one thing. Howard observed, "What's that?" He's not dealing with Richard Carter. He's dealing with Eleanor Carter. And that's an entirely different proposition. I smiled then, the first genuine smile since Evan's fist had connected with my shoulder. Yes, it is. The sun was setting as I prepared to leave, painting Savannah in shades of amber and gold somewhere across town. Miles Hargrove was probably savoring his final hours of anticipated victory. Let him enjoy it. Tomorrow's dawn would find him in federal custody, his elaborate revenge fantasy shattered like glass. "Eleanor," Clara called as I reached the door, "what you said about the truth being more devastating than cruelty? What did you mean?" I paused, thinking of the recordings we'd make tonight, the confessions that would be extracted. The moment Miles would realize his son had died for nothing, that his revenge had consumed his life while we'd simply continued living ours. "The cruelest truth of all," I said quietly, "is that his tragedy never mattered to us. Richard forgot about Mitchell Harrington the moment he signed those papers. We built our lives, raised our son, loved and laughed and lived while he rotted in his hatred. Tonight, he'll learn that his great revenge was nothing but a footnote in the Carter family story." That's cold. No, dear, that's survival, and after tonight, you'll understand the difference. I left them to their final preparations, driving through Savannah's historic streets toward Howard's office. The game board was set, the players in position. In 3 hours, it would all be over. Miles Hargrove thought he was about to claim his revenge. Instead, he was walking into his grave. Howard's office occupied the top floor of a restored cotton warehouse on River Street, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the Savannah River. By 8 p.m., the tourist crowds had thinned, leaving only the distant sound of jazz from the riverfront bars and the lonely horn of a container ship heading out to sea. Miles arrived precisely on time, his cream suit replaced by charcoal gray, dressed for a funeral. Though he didn't know it yet, he'd brought his own attorney, a nervous young man who clutched his briefcase like a life preserver. "Eleanor." Miles settled into the leather chair across from me, confidence radiating from every gesture. "I trust you've come prepared to resolve this unfortunate situation?" I let my hands tremble slightly as I pushed the folders across the mahogany table, the transfer documents for both beach properties, and the confession you requested, detailing Richard's business practices. His eyes gleamed as he reached for the papers. "You surprise me, Eleanor." I expected more resistance. "You've left me no choice. My son's life is worth more than properties or reputation." Miles began reviewing the documents while his attorney whispered nervously in his ear. I watched him savor each page, each word of the fabricated confession that painted Richard as a corporate predator. Howard sat beside me, the picture of defeated resignation. "This is very thorough," Miles murmured. "You admit to knowing about Richard's practices, benefiting from them. This will destroy the Carter name completely." "Yes. And you're willing to do this for Evan?" "A mother does what she must." He leaned back, studying me. "You know, I spent years imagining this moment, what I'd say, how it would feel. But sitting here now, watching the great Eleanor Carter brought low." He shook his head. "It's almost anticlimactic." "I'm sorry about your son," I said quietly. "Whatever Richard did, Your boy didn't deserve his fate. Something flickered across Miles's face. Surprise, perhaps, or long-buried grief. No, he didn't, but neither does yours. And yet here we are. Mr. Hargrove, his attorney interrupted. We should verify these deed transfers before... In a moment, Miles waved him off, still focused on me. Tell me, Eleanor, does Evan know what you're doing for him? No. He and Clara are waiting at home, terrified. He has no idea about any of this. Good. Let him live with the mystery. Let him wonder why his mother sacrificed everything. He picked up his Mont Blanc, preparing to sign. It's the not knowing that really destroys people. Trust me on that. The conference room door opened. Howard's paralegal entered with a silver tray bearing coffee and a large manila envelope. Mr. Blake, this just arrived by courier, marked urgent. Miles paused, pen hovering over the signature line. What is it? Howard made a show of opening the envelope, then paled. Miles, you need to see this. He passed over a photograph, Clara at her brother's bedside, taken by one of Ray's associates that afternoon, Tommy, healthy and laughing, very much alive and recovered. What is this? Miles's voice had gone dangerously quiet. That's Tommy Rodriguez, I said calmly, Clara's brother. Thriving, thanks to a legitimate transplant funded by the Childress Foundation. He never received a penny from your fake charity. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Miles's attorney started to speak, but Miles silenced him with a gesture. If Tommy didn't need my money, then Clara was never in your debt, Howard finished. She's been working with us. Miles, every email, every threat, every moment of coercion, all recorded. I pressed a button on my phone. Clara's voice filled the room, scared but determined. He said if I didn't marry Evan and help him get access to the Carter money, he'd hurt Tommy. But Tommy's transplant was already paid for. He was lying about everything. Miles stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is entrapment. No, a new voice said from the doorway. This is justice. Detective Williams entered, followed by 2 uniformed officers. Behind them, Janine Morrison from the Morning News raised her camera, the flash capturing Miles's moment of realization. Miles Hargrove, you're under arrest for fraud, extortion, money laundering, and criminal conspiracy, Williams announced. You have the right to remain silent. Wait! Miles looked wildly around the room. The gambling debts are real. Evan owes that money. To shell companies you control, Ray Doyle said. Emerging from the side office where he'd been monitoring everything, we have the paper trail. Miles, every fake business, every laundered dollar. 27 years of evidence. As the officers approached with handcuffs, Miles lunged toward me. You destroyed my life. You and your husband took everything. Williams caught him easily, forcing his hands behind his back, but Miles kept talking, years of rage pouring out. Do you know what it's like to lose everything? To watch your child die because you couldn't afford help? I planned every detail, every moment of this. I know, I said quietly, and that's why you failed. You were so focused on revenge. You couldn't see the trap closing around you. Clara appeared then, no longer the frightened girl from the wedding, but a young woman who'd found her steal. You terrorized me, threatened my brother, made me betray the man I love. For what? A ghost of a grudge? The FBI will want to talk to you about the charity fraud, Howard added. All those families you gave false hope to, just to fund your vendetta, that's a federal offense. As they led him away, Miles turned back one last time. This isn't over, Yes, it is, I interrupted. You'll go to prison. Your assets will be seized to repay your victims. And the saddest part? In a week. No one will remember your name. You'll be just another con artist in the Savannah Morning News. Your grand revenge reduced to a footnote. Just like you. The door closed behind them. The office fell silent, except for the scratch of Janine's pen as she scribbled notes. I'm Mrs. Carter, she said finally. Can I quote you on what happened here tonight? I straightened my pearls, composing myself. A disturbed man, consumed by ancient grievances, attempted to destroy my family. He failed, That's all the story you need. The riverfront was quiet as I stepped out of Howard's building, the September air carrying the salt-sweet scent of marsh and history. Behind me, Janine Morrison continued interviewing the others, gathering threads for a story that would dominate tomorrow's headlines, but I was finished with interviews, finished with explanations. My heels clicked against the old cobblestones as I walked toward the parking garage. The night seemed different somehow, lighter, as if Miles Hargrove's hatred had been a physical weight pressing down on the city itself. "Mom?" I turned to find Evan standing by my Mercedes, his face a masterwork of confusion and pain. Clara stood beside him, their hands intertwined despite everything. "Howard called us," he said quietly, "told us to come, said it was over." "Yes, it's over." "I don't understand it. The money I owed, the people who were going to—" His voice cracked. "Was any of it real?" "The debt was real. Your desperation was real. What you did to me at the wedding was very real." I let him see the fading bruise on my shoulder. "But the danger was manufactured. Evan, you were a pawn in someone else's game." He sank against the car, legs unable to hold him. "I hit you, my own mother, for money that was never really—" The sob that escaped him was raw, primal. Clara knelt beside him, but her eyes stayed on me. "Tell him. He needs to hear it all." So I did. Standing in that parking garage, surrounded by the echoes of Savannah's past, I told my son about Mitchell Harrington and Richard's betrayal, about 27 years of festering revenge, about how Miles had tried to destroy us the way Richard had destroyed him. "Dad did that." Evan's voice was small, childlike. "He ruined a man's life over money?" "Your father was complicated, brilliant, ruthless, capable of great love and great cruelty. I loved him, but I never claimed he was perfect." "And you knew all these years?" "I discovered it 3 days ago, and I handled it." Evan looked up at me then. Really looked. Perhaps for the first time in his adult life. "You saved me. After what I did, you still saved me." "Of course I did. You're my son." He stood slowly, approaching me with the caution of a man approaching a lion. "I'm sorry. God, Mom, I'm so sorry. I don't know how to—" "Stop." I placed a hand on his cheek, feeling the stubble that made him look so much like Richard. "Apologies are words. I want actions. Get help for the gambling. Be the husband Clara deserves. Build something real with your life. Not castles in the air like your father's fortune." "What about the family money?" "What about it?" I smiled slightly. "I'm 68 years old. Evan, I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. It'll all be yours eventually. But not yet. Not until you've proven you can stand on your own feet." "That's fair," Clara said firmly. "More than fair." We stood there in the humid night, an odd little family bound by trauma and truth somewhere across the city. Miles Hargrove was being processed into county jail. Tomorrow, federal agents would freeze his assets and begin unraveling 27 years of financial crimes. His elaborate revenge had collapsed in a single evening. "What happens now?" Evan asked. "Now? You go home, both of you. Start your marriage properly this time. No lies, no manipulation. Just 2 people who love each other figuring out life together." "What about you?" I looked out toward the river, where a container ship's lights glided past like fallen stars. "I have some decisions to make. About the company, the properties, the legacy your father left behind. Maybe it's time to clean house properly." They left after more tears, more apologies, more promises to do better. I believed them. Clara had proven her strength, and Evan, well, sometimes a man needs to hit bottom before he can rise. I drove home through the quiet streets, past squares where history slept beneath Spanish moss and starlight. The house felt different when I entered, not empty, but expectant, as if it, too, had been holding its breath during this long siege. In Richard's office, I poured myself a scotch from his private reserve and settled into his chair. The files about Mitchell Harrington still lay scattered across the desk. Tomorrow I'd have them destroyed. The past had claimed enough victims. My phone buzzed. A text from Howard. FBI took custody of Hargrove. He's looking at 30 to life. Well done, Eleanor. Well done. Was that what this was? I destroyed a man who'd tried to destroy my family, used his own weapons against him. Manipulation, careful planning, ruthless execution. Richard would have been proud. But I wasn't Richard, and that, perhaps, was the most important lesson of all. I raised my glass to the empty room. To survival, I said aloud, and to whatever comes next. Outside, Savannah slept on, keeping its secrets close. The Carter family had weathered another storm, bloodied but unbroken. Miles Hargrove had learned what I'd always known. We might bend, but we never break. And sometimes, the fiercest warriors wear pearls in St. John suits. The war was over. The recovery could begin. In the morning, I'd call my accountant about establishing a real transplant foundation. Something good should come from all this pain. Clara's brother would be the first beneficiary, but not the last. After all, I had Richard's fortune to spend. Might as well use it to balance the scales he'd tipped so long ago. The scotch burned warm in my chest as I turned off the lights and headed upstairs. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions. But tonight, Eleanor Carter could finally rest. The ghosts had been laid to rest, all of them. Nidia, thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect. If you enjoyed this tale of family drama and revenge, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts on Eleanor's journey. What would you have done in her situation? Let's discuss in the comments.